I was born in Kansas in 1884 and lived in Topeka till I was 18, moved to New York, and lived in New York until I was 45, never once wishing that I could have a garden. Then my husband, we had been married just a few months, and he said, would you like to live in the country? And without even knowing that I would, I said, oh, yes. And he bought this place, and we hadn't been here more than 10 minutes that I wasn't out there looking at the lilac bush and the apple trees and so on. And immediately I got thrilled about gardening. Knew nothing about it. Had a place twice too big, plowed up, and my brother and one or two other people told me what to do, and I did it for almost 15 years according to the way everybody else was doing it, with commercial fertilizer and poison spray and plowing. Hired a man to come and plow, and the plowman was always late, and I was always dying to get out there and get things in earlier than I could. Now, this is how this happened, the way I garden now. One morning in early April, I went out to the garden, couldn't do anything, just went out to shed a tear because I couldn't begin to plant. The plowman hadn't come. I walked over to the asparagus, and I said, we don't have to plow for you. Why do we have to plow for the other vegetables? And the asparagus said, you don't. Go ahead and plant. If the asparagus had said that to anybody with any sense, they wouldn't have paid any attention. They would have said, well, you're a perennial, because asparagus, like a tree or like a rose bush, just comes up every year. But anyway, since I wasn't very smart, I just ran and got my seeds and planted them, and that's been going on for 35 years. I never had a plowman again. If I told you that the way I garden is very little work, you wouldn't know what I mean because you don't know what I call very little work. You might think that I meant I only work 6 hours a day instead of 12. So I'm going to tell you exactly how I garden. I have a vegetable garden, 45 by 50, in which I grow vegetables for 2 people all the year round. Sorry to make you jealous, but I haven't been in a supermarket for at least 14 years. I grow all the vegetables for the 2 of us, freeze the surplus, and do all of that work myself. I have a few flower beds, not big ones, but a few. I do all that work. I do all of my housework, my cooking, and I answer a terrible lot of mail, and I never do any of this after 11 o'clock in the morning. Now, the hands go up. Your hands are going to go up and ask me what time I get up, and my answer to that is somewhere between 6 and 8, according to when I feel like it and when I want to. And the first thing is a long, leisurely breakfast, Roman style, stretched out on the couch. But I'm all through with all of this after 11 o'clock in the morning. The reason is that I never plow or spade or cultivate or weed or hoe or use a fertilizer or use a poison spray or use a compost pile or water. I just plant and pick. The reason that I can do all this is because I keep my ground covered all year long on hay mulch, which rots, fertilizes the ground, keeps down the weeds, keeps the ground soft, and that's all there is to it. I had these turnips in here all winter long, and I've picked most of them. They look awfully little, but that's because I picked all the big ones. But there are a few left. We'll eat those. And now we'll put in a row of parsley and a row of dill. We eat them together, so we plant them together. Why not? Now, all I do anyway, just sprinkle the seeds. Now, I never really cover seeds the way most people do. Little seeds like this, I just pat the row a little bit, and they're planted. And the same with the dill. Since weed seeds can come up all over your garden without your fooling around planting them, I don't see why the other things can't too. So now they're planted. That's it for the parsley and dill. Now I'm going to plant some potatoes. No, I'm not going to call it planting. Everybody wouldn't dream of planting potatoes like this, but I can think of no reason why not. They grow. They come up and you get potatoes, and I guess that's what you want when you plant potatoes, is potatoes. Well, those are a little too close. See, I had these in the house all winter, and then they begin to sprout, and then instead of throwing them away, you just come and throw them on the ground. And later on in the year, you come out and pick some potatoes. It's very simple. I would be willing to bet that 99 out of 100 people who see me do this wouldn't do it themselves. But that doesn't bother me. That's it. Potatoes are planted. We're through with that job. Get some hay on top of those potatoes. Otherwise, they would just lie there and die. And we don't want them to die, so we'll do this. This keeps the... You see, most people would cut those potatoes up with just one sprout in each piece of potato, but you don't have to. And I don't do anything I don't want to do unless I have to, and I don't have to. So there we are. I'm covering these potatoes because if I didn't, the sun would just bake them and they would die. I just keep the sun off of them, and they will grow right through the hay. You can't do this with a hard hay, or they couldn't get through. I never put any hay on top of seeds. The hay around the garden is for two things. The main thing is to fertilize your soil, but the other thing that the hay does is keep your ground moist. In all of the over 35 years that I have planted this way, I have never had to water once. As I plant all my seeds now, I take just a little cottonseed meal and sprinkle it right with the seeds. Just in case it does rain too much, cottonseed meal supplies the nitrogen that plants have got to have. My father had a 40-acre farm, but he was superintendent of schools. He wasn't a farmer, really. However, he sold a few things like strawberries and so on. I was always top as a picker because I lived right there and I knew where the best ones were. My mother was a person who never told her 9 children what to do and what not to do. And she said, I just pay attention to my inner voice. And since I wouldn't think of doing anything that somebody else tells me, how on earth could I be so unfair as to go around telling anybody else what to do? Thee follow thy inner voice, and I'll follow mine. My father was not as noticeable that way as my mother, but he also didn't interfere. My father said to me once, Ruth, it's good to think for yourself, but just once in a long time, couldn't you think like other people? And I asked him like who, and he changed the subject. My mother never scolded. But she had tricks. She could protect herself. For instance, she loved to read, but in those days, you couldn't go to your bedroom and read in the wintertime because you didn't heat your bedroom, of course. And the only place you could read in the winter would be in the living room, which was warm. With 9 children, don't tell me that you could sit there and read for a few hours and not have some of the children come in and interrupt you, you see. But she had her little trick. She'd sit down to read, and she'd have a basin of very cold water right there by her side with a washcloth in it. And if any of us would come in to ask her something, she would say, oh, come here, come closer, dear. I didn't hear what you said. What did you... Oh, honey, your face is dirty. Do you think we'd go nearer when that basin of water was there? No, indeed. What I feel I know for sure is do what you want to do and don't tell other people how to behave. To make rules for other people, I just don't get it. For instance, when I helped Carrie Nation smash saloons, that was a big thing. They shouldn't do that, you see. Well, now when I take a drink, I say, forgive me, Carrie Nation, I've got to have a little drink. Yes, I helped her smash saloons. Carrie Nation was a woman who lived in Kansas, and in Kansas, it was against the law to sell liquor. And she went around to places and came to Topeka, where we lived. She would get a group of people together, mostly women, and they would go to a drugstore or someplace which was illegally selling liquor. By the way, I was 16 years old. It was in 1900. And this crowd of women gathered at the State House and then walked down the street. And, of course, the policeman knew Carrie Nation was in town, so they kind of followed us. And Carrie Nation went up to this drugstore, which she had found out was selling liquor illegally. And she smashed one of the big panes in front, and I went and smashed the other one. And the policeman came up and arrested Carrie Nation and broke my heart. They didn't arrest me. I had to go home and go to Sunday school. There's nothing dull about gardening, I can tell you that. You saw the raccoon cage. Well, for raccoons, that outside fence doesn't do any good. They just get over that and then eat your corn. They don't eat anything else but corn. And I got so desperate trying to protect my corn that my brother built that cage for me. I don't know whether I told you how I finished one of my articles about the raccoons. I finished the article by saying, now, of course, the raccoons can't get my corn, but they're so smart that when they figure out how to go in there and open the door and go and eat my corn, I'm just going to go back to the house, get on the couch, drink 2 daiquiris instead of 1, and forget it all. Really.
Why didn't you give him a key?
That's right. Why didn't I? Here you'll see a little row of lettuce, and here's a row of carrots. It isn't acting quite normal, but who's normal, huh? Now, the sweet Spanish onions are doing very nicely, and that little potato, well, it just came up, and we'll let it stay there, why not? And what's that? Another potato that just jumped there. Let it alone. What the devil is this? That's a weed. Out with it. It's fantastic what you can do growing your own things. It really is. And my rhubarb is just, well, I say to everybody, if you want a rhubarb root, please tell me, because I've got to get rid of some of it. It spreads and grows. Now, I don't know how many people are interested in soybeans.